The man standing at the far end of the expo hall didn't look like someone who belonged there. His shirt was worn at the collar. His table was made of plywood propped on folding legs, and what sat on top of it looked like something pulled straight from a dumpster. People laughed. They pulled out their phones to record him. A security guard had already walked over twice, but 30 minutes later, a black luxury sedan pulled up to the curb. A woman in a tailored suit stepped out, walked past every polished booth and glowing display, and stopped right in front of him. Nobody laughed after that. And what they didn't know, what no one in that room could have guessed, was that the man standing behind that table had been moving toward this moment for 10 years. Caleb Matthews was 27 years old, and he had learned early that the world does not wait for a man to catch his breath. He lived in a one-bedroom apartment on the east side of Columbus, Ohio. A place that was technically 2 rooms, if you counted the narrow kitchen nook, where a mini-fridge hummed so loud at night, it sometimes woke his daughter. The apartment smelled of solder and machine oil, a scent that had settled so deeply into the walls and carpet that no amount of cleaning could fully remove it. To Caleb, it wasn't an unpleasant smell. It was the smell of work. His daughter's name was Lily. She was 6 years old, small for her age, with wide brown eyes, and a habit of collecting broken things, cracked toy cars, busted calculators, old remote controls, and lining them up on the windowsill as if they were precious. She had been sick off and on since she was 3. Nothing catastrophic, the doctors said, but nothing simple, either. A recurring lung condition that required regular medication, 2 specialist visits a year, and on bad months, a short hospital stay. Caleb had long since memorized the name of every drug on her prescription list, every dosage, every potential side effect. He kept the paperwork in a manila folder on top of the fridge, clipped together with a binder clip, reviewed every time a new bill arrived. He had once held a job with a small electronics manufacturer on the outskirts of town. Quality control, circuit testing, systems troubleshooting, not glamorous work, but steady. He had been good at it, patient enough to catch what faster technicians missed, precise enough to trace a fault across 12 layers of board without losing the thread. Then the company was acquired. The new management restructured. Caleb's entire department was let go in the same week along with 42 other people. He received a severance check that covered 6 weeks of rent and not much else. That had been 2 years ago. Since then, he had been doing what he could. Small repair jobs picked up through word of mouth, a neighbor's busted laptop, a bar owner's broken sound system, a dentist officer's obsolete intercom that no one else would touch. He charged fairly, finished fast, and never promised what he couldn't deliver. But the work was inconsistent. Some months he made enough. Others he did not. What kept him steady wasn't money. It was Lily. Every morning before school, she would climb onto the stool beside his workbench and watch him work. She asked questions he never dismissed. What does that piece do? Why does the light blink? Why do you always smell the board before you test it? He answered everyone. He told her that a circuit is like a conversation. That electricity moves the same way logic does. That a broken thing isn't useless. It's just misunderstood. She absorbed all of it. People who passed Caleb on the street who saw him hauling a duffel bag of tools or stopping to pick through the electronics recycling bin outside the library generally made certain assumptions that he was struggling, that he had made poor choices, that the slight slump in his shoulders was the posture of a man who had given up. They were right about one thing. He was struggling. Everything else they had completely wrong. It had started with a fan, not the decorative kind, an industrial cooling fan salvaged from a discarded server tower that someone had left beside a dumpster behind a data center on the edge of town. Caleb had seen it during a repair job nearby and taken it home in the back of his car without fully knowing why. The fan was still functional. That was the thing about hardware that people threw away. Most of it wasn't broken. It was just no longer convenient. Over the following months, he started collecting more deliberately. He made a circuit of the industrial recycling drop-offs, the electronics bins at the public library, the surplus pile behind a small IT firm that cleared its inventory twice a year. He wasn't hoarding. He was sourcing. Every component he kept had passed a test. If it didn't function, he didn't take it. If it functioned but had no clear application, he catalogued it and waited until he understood why it might matter. He kept everything in labeled bins stacked along the wall of his apartment: capacitors, voltage regulators, heat sinks, microcontrollers, signal amplifiers, lengths of copper wire he had stripped and sorted by gauge. Lily called it Daddy's wall of pieces. She was not wrong. The idea had come to him during one of Lily's hospital stays. The kind of restless, half awake thinking that happens in waiting rooms at 2 o'clock in the morning. He had been going over a problem he'd first noticed in his repair work. Small commercial clients, restaurants, and clinics and small offices were consistently overpaying for energy because the systems managing their power, the controllers that balance load between different devices, were either outdated, overbuilt, or poorly calibrated for their actual usage patterns. The hardware that could solve the problem existed. The software logic was not complicated. What was missing was a cheap modular way to put it together. He started building when he got home. It took 14 months. The device he eventually produced looked to any untrained eye like a disaster. It was roughly the size of a lunchbox assembled from components that had clearly never been designed to exist together. Strips of recycled circuit board were layered and soldered at angles. A repurposed microcontroller originally from a car's dashboard system served as the brain. 2 salvaged capacitors mismatched in color and size served as the energy buffer. The casing was a cut-down server panel bent and re-drilled by hand. It was without question one of the ugliest objects Caleb had ever made. It was also the most sophisticated. What the device did in plain terms was this. It monitored real-time electrical load across multiple inputs, identified waste patterns in milliseconds, and redistributed power dynamically to prevent the kind of inefficiency that silently inflated every commercial energy bill. In testing, which Caleb had done patiently across 6 different setups, including his own apartment, a neighbor's small office, and the backroom of a barbershop, whose owner owed him a favor, it had consistently reduced energy consumption by between 37 and 43%. He had done the math. For a single mid-size commercial property, that translated to somewhere between $8,000 and $14,000 in annual savings. For a portfolio of properties, a hotel chain, a hospital network, a retail franchise, the number multiplied into something almost difficult to say out loud. The device had no brand. It had no patent, not yet, though he had printed the application form and read it 11 times. It had no name except the one Lily had given it when she first saw it sitting on his workbench. She had pressed her chin on the edge of the table, studied it for a long moment, and said, "It looks like a puzzle box." Caleb had not corrected her. The Columbus Emerging Tech Expo was held on the second Saturday of November in a converted warehouse space near the Scioto River that the organizers had dressed up with track lighting, vinyl banners, and a rented espresso machine near the entrance that no one seemed to use. It was the kind of event that wanted badly to be something larger than it was. Local startups, a few regional investors, a modest press list, and a handful of academics who attended every year out of habit. Caleb had paid the $75 table fee 6 weeks in advance, setting aside the money from 3 repair jobs. He had received a confirmation email with a floor number and a table assignment near the back of the hall. He had not been given a category, a description slot, or a place in the program. He was listed simply as independent exhibitor. He arrived early before the doors opened, carrying the device in a padded plastic bin he had lined with foam cut from an old mattress topper. He also brought a folding table, a power strip, 2 printed data sheets he had made at a copy center for $11, and a handwritten sign that read in large clean letters, "Adaptive Power Optimization System, live demo available." He set up in 20 minutes, arranged the data sheets in a neat stack, plugged the device into a test outlet, and waited. The hall filled steadily. Most of what surrounded him was, by any measure, impressive. The startup 2 tables over was presenting a machine learning platform with a 42 inches monitor and a backlit logo panel. The booth across from him had a team of 4, all wearing identical navy blazers, demonstrating a drone delivery prototype with a looping video reel. Near the entrance, a company offering an artificial intelligence scheduling app had installed a miniature stage where a presenter gave a polished 5-minute pitch on the hour. Every hour, Caleb's table, by comparison, looked like someone had set up a garage sale inside a museum. He knew that he wasn't embarrassed by it. He had understood before he came that the optics were not in his favor. He wasn't selling the optics. He was selling what the device could do. Those were 2 entirely different things, and he had long since stopped confusing them. But the gap between those 2 things was exactly what the room saw. Attendees moved through the space with the particular efficiency of people who had allocated a fixed amount of time to being impressed. They paused at the booths with the larger screens, the most people, the most noise. They slowed down for anything with a rotating display or a free branded item. They glanced at Caleb's table, registered what they saw. A young man in a worn shirt, a salvaged device, a handwritten sign, and kept moving. One woman in a lanyard stopped and picked up one of his printed sheets. She read the first line, set it back down, and walked away without saying anything. A man in a checkered sport coat paused to look at the datasheets for the fourth time. He had told Lily that morning before dropping her at his neighbor's apartment that he would be back by evening. She had handed him a folded piece of paper, a drawing she had made of his device, labeled in her handwriting, Daddy's Puzzle Box. He had put it in his jacket pocket. He could feel it there now. They arrived sometime around 11:30. A group of 5 mid-20s to early 30s. The kind of young professionals who had the expensive sneakers and the casual confidence of people who had recently raised a funding round or were very close to believing they had. They moved through the hall in a loose cluster, laughing at something among themselves, pausing occasionally at booths with a practiced eye of people who spent weekends at events like this. They stopped at the drone company. They watched the machine learning demo. They collected 2 branded stress balls and a pen from the scheduling app booth. And then they reached Caleb. The first one to notice was a man in a slim-cut grey jacket, tall with the easy posture of someone accustomed to being looked at. He slowed, looked at the table, looked at Caleb, and then looked back at the table again. A slow smile spread across his face. "What's this?" he said, not entirely to Caleb. One of the others stepped closer. Is that soldered together by hand?" She was already pulling out her phone. "It's an energy optimization system," Caleb said. His voice was even. "Adaptive load management. It redistributes electrical consumption in real time to eliminate waste." The man in the grey jacket picked up one of the datasheets, scanned it for 4 seconds, and set it back down. "Bro," he said to the group with a laugh that invited them all to join. "Someone brought actual junk to the expo." They laughed. Not crewy. Exactly the way people laugh when they feel safe. When the target isn't the kind of person who could respond in any way that would cost them anything. The woman with the phone was filming now, angling her camera across the table at the device. "This is incredible," she murmured in the tone someone uses when they mean the opposite. $1 million tech right here, guys." A few passers-by slowed to see what the laughter was about. Some of them smiled without knowing exactly why, catching the energy of the room. One older man shook his head slowly, and kept walking. A teenager stopped, looked at the device, looked at the group laughing and laughed too reflexively, the way people do when they don't want to seem like they're missing the joke. Caleb said nothing. He straightened one of the data sheets that had shifted slightly on the table. He checked the demo unit's display. He poured the last of the coffee from his thermos and held the cup with both hands. He had expected this, not this exact group, not this exact moment, but something like it. He had known from the moment he loaded his car that morning, that the most likely outcome of the day was not a deal or a handshake or even a serious conversation. It was this. The look that people give to things they don't understand, dressed up as mockery, because mockery feels less threatening than the possibility that you've missed something. He had felt that look before. He had watched it erase people, watched men twice his age shrink under it, pack up their tables, change their minds about themselves. He had made a decision some time ago that the look would not work on him. The man in the grey jacket was still talking, narrating the device to his group as if giving a comedic tour. "And this part," he said, pointing to one of the salvaged capacitors, "is definitely a piece from a 1990s television set." One of them said, "Someone call security." They laughed again. Caleb looked at the man directly for the first time. He didn't speak. He didn't smile. He held eye contact for exactly long enough to establish that he had heard everything, understood everything, and had chosen silence as a complete and considered response. Then he looked back at his device. The man in the grey jacket seemed for just a moment slightly less comfortable than he had been. He said something else, quieter, and the group moved on. Caleb waited. The man who approached at 12:45 had a staff lanyard, a clipboard, and the uncomfortable expression of someone delivering a message he had been asked to deliver but did not fully believe in. His name was Derek. According to the badge, he was around 30 with a cautious energy about him. The kind of person who chose his words carefully, not because he was thoughtful, but because he was afraid of saying the wrong one. "Hey," Derek said. He stopped at the edge of Caleb's table. "So, I've been asked to come over here by the floor coordinator." Caleb looked up. "Okay, there have been some comments from other exhibitors and a few attendees." Derek glanced down at his clipboard, then back up. "The concern is that the appearance of your display is a bit inconsistent with the overall presentation. Standard of the event." Caleb let the sentence sit for a moment. "You're asking me to leave." Derek shifted his weight. "Not immediately, but yeah, Would appreciate it if you could start packing up in the next 30 minutes or so. The space behind Caleb's table had by now acquired a small orbit of ambient spectators, people close enough to hear, positioned with the studied casualness of those pretending not to listen. A few of the nearby exhibitors had paused their conversations. The man from the machine learning booth was looking over. Caleb stood up straight. He was not a tall man, but when he stood still with his full attention directed at something, there was a quality to his stillness that was hard to read around. "How much time do I have left?" he asked. "We'd like you to start now." "Honestly, I paid the table fee," Caleb said. "Not as an argument, as a fact," Derek nodded. "I know, and that's not I mean the refund process. I can look into that for you." "I don't want a refund." Caleb picked up one of his data sheets, looked at it briefly, set it down again. "I'd like 1 more hour. That's all." Derek looked uncomfortable. "I don't know if that's 1 hour," Caleb said. His tone hadn't changed. It was patient, direct, and entirely without pleading. "After that, if no one has engaged seriously with this product, I'll pack up without any issue. I won't cause a scene. I won't make this difficult. I just need 1 more hour." There was a pause that lasted long enough to be noticed by everyone nearby. "The thing is," Caleb added quietly enough that only Derek could hear him, "I didn't come here to impress anyone. I came because somewhere in this building, there might be exactly one person who understands what this does. That's all I need. One person." Derek looked at him for a moment. Then he looked at the device on the table. Really looked at it perhaps for the first time past the appearance of it. He clicked his pen. "I'll give you to 130, he said. "But if the floor coordinator asks, I'll take responsibility for it," Caleb said. "Thank you." Derek walked away. The ambient spectators peeled off. The machine learning guy went back to his demo. Caleb sat back down. He repositioned the device slightly on the table so the main display panel faced forward at a cleaner angle. He checked his watch. 47 minutes. He thought about Lily, who was at this moment probably sitting on his neighbor's couch watching cartoons and asking questions about how the television worked. He thought about the manila folder on the refrigerator. He thought about the cost of next month's medication, which he had not yet fully covered. He straightened his sign, folded his hands, and waited. Evelyn Cross arrived at the Columbus Emerging Tech Expo at 12:53 in the afternoon, which was technically speaking too late to matter. The event was winding down. The espresso machine near the entrance had been unplugged. Several exhibitors were already consolidating their materials, rolling up display panels, disconnecting cables. The energy of the morning, that particular blend of ambition and performance that fills rooms like this before the disappointment of reality sets in, had largely dissipated. Evelyn had not intended to attend at all. She was 34 years old, the founder and chief executive of Green Cycle Systems, a company she had built from a 2-person consulting firm into a mid-size operation with 63 employees and an annual contract portfolio that had cleared $18 million in the previous fiscal year. The company's core business was energy efficiency consulting for commercial real estate, helping property managers, hotel chains, and healthcare networks understand where they were wasting money and what it would cost to stop. It was not a glamorous business, but it was a precise one, and Evelyn ran it with the methodical focus of someone who had never once confused movement with progress. She had planned to spend this Saturday at her office reviewing quarterly projections. Her assistant, Marcus, had flagged the expo 2 weeks earlier as a potential networking opportunity. Evelyn had dismissed it. Then that morning, a scheduled call with a key client had fallen through, and Marcus, sensing an opening, had sent her the address with the note, "Go 2 hours. It probably won't hurt." She went. She wore a charcoal suit with a white shirt, no lanyard, no badge. She had not registered. At the entrance, she gave her name to a volunteer who looked her up, found no record, and then looked up again at the suit and quietly waved her through. Evelyn moved through the hall the way she moved through most environments, efficiently, without lingering, filtering what she saw against a set of internal criteria that had been refined over 11 years in the industry. She noticed the drone company and identified within 40 seconds that their logistics model would fail at scale. She stopped at the machine learning booth, asked one precise question about training data methodology, received an answer that told her everything she needed to know, and moved on. She was nearly at the end of the hall when she stopped. Later, when someone asked her what had made her pause, she would say it was the handwritten sign. Not the slickness of it, obviously. There was none. It was the precision of the letters. The sign did not say something vague or aspirational. It said exactly what the thing was. Adaptive Power Optimization System live demo available. 6 words and a technical category. No tagline, no hyperbole, no appeal to disruption or the future. That kind of brevity in her experience came from 2 places. People who had no idea what they were selling and people who knew precisely what they were selling and had no patience for anything else. She looked at the device. It was objectively a mess. Visually, it had no business existing in any professional context. The soldering was dense and asymmetrical. The casing was clearly salvaged. One of the indicator lights appeared to be from a completely different era of electronics manufacturing, blinking with the slow, steady pulse of a wristwatch rather than anything digital. She looked at the man behind the table. He was not what she expected. He was young, younger than she had anticipated from the sign. His shirt was clean but well worn. He was sitting with both hands folded on the table, not pitching to anyone, not distributing materials, not trying to stop people walking by. He was simply present in the way that very few people at events like this manage to be present, as if he had nowhere else to be and no interest in being seen. He looked back at her. "Can I show you what it does?" He said it was not the question she usually heard. Usually people told her what things did, often before she'd asked. The question was quieter than that. It was an offer, not a performance. Evelyn stepped forward, put her hands in her jacket pockets, and said, "Please." What followed was, by every outward appearance, an ordinary conversation. Evelyn stood on the opposite side of the table. Caleb connected the demo unit to the power strip and brought the display panel to life. A modest LCD screen showing 3 columns of real-time data, input load, distribution output, and waste percentage. The numbers shifted in small increments the way live data does when it is not staged. "Start from the problem," Evelyn said. "Not a request, an instruction." Most commercial properties run on static load distribution. Caleb said the system draws what it expects to draw based on a fixed schedule, peak, off-peak, baseline, but actual usage patterns don't follow that schedule.